Evan Maddox stood at the edge of the tasting room, swirling a too-warm Pinot Noir in his glass while trying not to think about how far his vineyard had fallen behind schedule. The late frost in March had pushed their harvest back by nearly 3 weeks, and the tourists who once lined up for tastings now trickled in with cautious curiosity instead of enthusiasm. At 43, Evan carried the weathered look of someone who had loved and been let down by the land too many times. But he stayed. The vines were his inheritance, not by blood, but by battle. Every sun-split grape, every dry leaf, was earned. The room buzzed with chatter from a small group of local winemakers. Evan half listened, nodding occasionally, until he heard a name. That pulled him back to the moment Meghan Duval. That name had been floating through the industry like a breeze before a storm. Once a working actress, then a duchess, and now, according to murmurs and press releases, a vintner. She was launching her own label as ever from a private vineyard in Montecito, and already her team had secured high-end distribution contracts and features in luxury magazines. Evan leaned against the bar and picked at the edge of a cork coaster. He knew how these things went. Celebrity names slapped on bottles, glossed in branding, wrapped in romance. But this felt different. She was using the Duchess title on promotional material. Not loudly, not crassly, but it was there. Subtle royal. Cues. The seal on the cork bore a faint crown. The glass was tinted with deep royal purple, and one of the wine descriptions referenced noble lineage and a heritage of resilience. To Evan, it wasn't elegance. It was leverage disguised as artistry. He thought back to his own vineyards. Opening 10 years ago, barely enough money to bottle his first vintage. No PR team, no legacy. Just his late uncle's old land and a dream. Seeing someone else breeze into the industry with headlines and handshakes lit something uneasy in his chest. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just ego, just envy, but that wasn't all of it. Later that afternoon, Jamie Lorick stopped by. Jamie had been a friend since their early years in Sonoma. A barrel broker, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of charisma that made people forget their reservations. Jamie pulled up in his matte black truck and stepped out holding a copy of Vintner's Monthly with Meghan's face across the cover. Without speaking, he handed it to Evan. The title read, as ever, A Duchess's Pour into the Future. Evan didn't speak at first. He just stared at the photo Meghan in a flowing white blouse, walking between trellised vines like she was born to it. Jamie crossed his arms and said nothing. Evan eventually placed the magazine down, rubbed his jaw, and walked out to the TV phone. Pergi the pizza. Montuli placed the magazine down, rubbed his jaw, and walked out to the beam edge of the vineyard, boots crunching on dry earth. From the slope, he could see the rows stretching ahead, imperfect, stubborn, sun-worn. The kind of vines that didn't give their fruit easily. He didn't say it aloud, but he knew this wasn't just another celebrity project. It was something larger, something more personal. And though he didn't know it yet, Meghan's vineyard dream was about to disrupt more than just market shelves. It would shake old loyalties, stir hidden rivalries, and unravel assumptions about what legacy truly meant. The letter arrived in an unmarked envelope, slipped under the door of Evan's office early one Monday morning. He found it lying on the floor just after sunrise, the vineyard still cloaked in mist. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and bore no official seal, just a neatly typed message stripped of emotion. It condemned the use of royal symbolism in a commercial brand and questioned the ethical standing of as ever. The language was careful, but the implication was not. Someone in the upper circles of the monarchy had taken offense, and someone else had made sure it found its way to him. Evan stood at the window, letter in hand, as the first light hit the vines. He didn't know what unsettled him more, the letter itself or the fact that someone believed he should see it. His thoughts turned immediately to Jamie. The last time they'd spoken, Jamie had been distant, almost smug. There had been something. In the way he tossed the magazine on the table, something too knowing. Later that day, Evan drove into town. He found Jamie at a small outdoor cafe near the plaza, seated under a striped umbrella with a tablet in one hand and a glass of white wine in the other. Evan didn't sit. Instead, he pulled a letter from his jacket and placed it on the table. Jamie barely blinked. He leaned forward, eyes scanning the contents, then leaned back slowly as if considering how much to reveal. Jamie shrugged, then motioned to the empty chair. Evan hesitated, then sat down, tension heavy in his shoulders. Jamie began talking, not looking directly at him. He explained how the wine world was built on tradition, on the credibility of symbols. A title like Duchess, even unofficial, carried weighted-shaped perception, influenced buyers. He said things had to be kept in balance, that no one should be able to bend centuries of legacy for branding purposes. He said Meghan was walking too close to a line, and that lines, when blurred, needed correcting. Evan listened, but something twisted inside him. Jamie's tone wasn't defensive. It was deliberate, calculated. He wasn't warning Evan, he was recruiting him. As if Evan's approval would legitimize whatever quiet campaign was forming against Meghan's brand. Evan wanted to protest, but the words stuck. He didn't agree with Meghan's choices, but he wasn't sure he could stand with Jamie either. Over the next week, the letter leaked. No one claimed responsibility, but soon the tabloids had it, dissecting every word. Headlines questioned Meghan's intentions, her respect for protocol, even her legitimacy as a winemaker. Industry forums exploded with debate. Was it unethical or just smart branding? Evan's name began appearing in online discussions, usually next to the phrase local industry veteran. One of his offhand comments about respecting tradition had been pulled from a podcast interview and twisted to suggest open condemnation. He woke one morning to find a bottle of as ever smashed at the base of his vineyard gate. The dark stains spread across the gravel like spilled ink. Next to it was a note, barely legible, reading, "You don't belong in her world." Or ours. That night, Evan wandered the barrel room alone, the scent of oak and fermentation filling the air. He ran his hand along the old barrels, listening to the distant creak of settling wood. He thought about the woman in the magazine photo, walking the path. Vines with elegance and certainty, and wondered what it cost her to carry that image. He thought about Jamie, about secrets whispered behind firm handshakes, and about the note on the gravel. He poured himself a glass of last year's Syrah and drank in silence. The storm had come, and he had no umbrella. In the weeks that followed. The leaked letter as ever became the eye of a cultural whirlwind. Evan watched from the margins, half in and half out, not yet sure which side he belonged to. Each morning he skimmed the headlines, watching how the narrative twisted and swelled. One article accused Meghan Duval of exploiting royal sentiment to sell wine. Another defended her as a self-made entrepreneur reclaiming her story through the very vines she walked. The truth, Evan thought, was probably somewhere in between, but nobody seemed interested in that. And then, without warning, she responded. Meghan's team released a single video. It was understated, just her, standing between two rows of Cabernet Sauvignon vines, sunlight painting her shoulders in gold. There was no interviewer, no flashy editing. Just her voice, steady and clear. She spoke of her mother, of memory, of how the phrase as ever had appeared in a note she once found folded inside an old cookbook. She spoke of heritage not as bloodline, but as survival. And then she paused, looked into the lens, and without defensiveness or bravado, said she had never used a title to gain anything, only to remind herself what she had endured. The video spread like wildfire. Evan watched it twice. The first time in silence, the second time with a heavy heart. There was no doubt in him anymore. She believed in what she was doing. And that meant something. But not everyone was moved. One afternoon, a knock came at his office door. Carter Rhodes stood on the porch, a notebook in one hand, a tired expression on his face. Evan recognized him immediately. The young journalist had been writing sharp opinion pieces about the wine industry, often going where others wouldn't. Evan invited him in, poured 2 cups of coffee, and waited. Carter didn't waste time. He spread out a folder of documents across Evan's table. Contracts, emails, wire transfers. They weren't illegal, but they were precise. They showed Jamie Lorrick's quiet involvement with a London-based PR firm known for strategic reputation. Takedowns. The same firm that had anonymously circulated the royal letter to industry insiders. The same firm that had once been hired to suppress press around a royal scandal years ago. Carter leaned back in his chair and waited. Evan didn't speak for a while. He traced the corner of one document